A Chinese AI startup, DeepSeek, is shaking up the global tech landscape with its innovative large language model called R1 and cost-effective approach to AI development. As DeepSeek makes waves in AI, questions loom about its potential to rival US giants like NVIDIA and OpenAI. Let's get more on this. Brad Gastworth is from Unearthing Opportunities, joins us. Great to see you.
Great to be here, Aaron.
All right, fair to say that there has been a fair bit of panic that has been going on in the markets as a result. NVIDIA shares massive drop in one day. There's been a bit of a clawback. I wonder, was this the reset that the AI industry needed, or is there something greater here?
Yeah, I mean, a reset to say the least. I think there's a lot of questions on investors' mind. First and foremost, what's really powering this R1? Is DeepSeek different components in there than what they are saying? That's first and foremost. We need to see exactly how they're powering their system. Now, let's just take it, with their word that they're only using the smaller chips. Then, I mean, every one of these large AI companies are certainly scrambling. You already heard Meta is assembling these special force groups to try and figure out how R1 got to become, one of the best language models there is, and for a fraction of the price. So yeah, absolutely, Aaron. I think the reset makes sense given this news. Now it's really fact finding. Is this real? Is it in terms of, obviously the site works, but is it being powered by what they are saying is being powered by? That's really the most important question here.
All right, there's a lot that we can break down, and it isn't just about the powering, right? So 10 to 20, maybe even 30 times cheaper and less power, and then it goes back to the Biden administration, who essentially banned chip makers like NVIDIA from sending their powerful chips through to China. But NVIDIA found a loophole for quite a while, which is they found a way to send them some chips. We don't know whether or not it's those chips that are going to be used full on or full time, or whether it's the previous older stuff. But there is a big difference between ChatGPT and also between DeepSeek that is worth pointing out. It's said that ChatGPT is kind of like a librarian who's read all the books. So when you ask it a question, it's read all the books, which is hugely intensive. Whereas DeepSeek's a little bit like a detective who's read some of the books, but will go and find the actual information for you, meaning it's more efficient because it's only using so much power when it's doing the search that you've asked it for, as opposed to having it everywhere. It kind of reminds me of the space race where, the famous story of NASA spending millions on a pen that works in space and the Soviets use a pencil. Would you say that, we talk about a Sputnik moment, is that the main point here? They're just doing it differently.
Yeah, and I'm not sure here, Aaron. I think, there's a lot to still learn. I think the most important question is really what chips are they using? And we don't know. And I think if they really are using, the lesser NVIDIA chips, and they're doing this for in the millions instead of the tens to 50, the $10 to $50 billion type range that most of these AI language models are spending, then this is a huge negative, right? But we need to learn exactly what chips they're using. Now, to your point on the sort of that loophole, I've been hearing from executives for a number of years now since those tariffs and so those bans went into place, that a lot of resellers were still getting chips out to China. So I think there's a lot of ways these companies can get them. Again, the big question here is what's powering, not the power usage, but what chips are inside that's causing this model to do what it's doing. And that's really, I think after we get that answered, and I don't know if we ever will, then we can really sort of peel back that onion. Because if you can do this for tens of millions of dollars instead of the 50 billion to 100 billion range, yeah, this is a huge negative for a lot of the companies because you won't need those expensive systems.
All right,
now,
while you were talking there, I used this old-fashioned thing called Google and asked what chips is DeepSeek using. It says that according to their research paper, DeepSeek engineers say they've used about 2,000 NVIDIA H800 chips. Are these the ones that NVIDIA tried to get past the Biden administration?
Yeah, those are the low power, the lower efficiency. They're not their AI chip. So this is a significantly cheaper chip than most of these systems are using. And that, again, Zuck talked to his team. There's several articles about these sort of special groups being formulated because they spent, over $100 billion building Meta's AI, and now you're having something in the tens of millions competing, if not better. I mean, that's a major issue. So again, we don't know exactly. Obviously, the reports are saying that it's those chips. I'm just saying we don't know for sure that it is those chips powering it.
All right, let's say that it is, and there's 2,000 of them, and they were the ones that NVIDIA sold to China after the Biden administration put through the rules, but they closed the loophole about a year later, meaning those 2,000 chips, it's probably going to stay there. Does that put some limits on how far DeepSeek can actually grow from here?
Yeah, I mean, it will come down to the accessibility of getting more. I mean, yeah, absolutely right in terms of, yeah, they will be limited if they cannot get more by the administration. Now, the concern that I think a lot of companies and this government in the United States has is there's been these ways to circumvent it, either through VARs, value-added resellers, or different channels. And again, okay, we'll use that grain of salt and say that they are powering it by this chip. If that is true, this is a major negative for NVIDIA, because others will try and figure out a way to do this and replicate that system. You need to spend the money. Again, I don't believe that's the case, but that being said, it's something you cannot ignore at all.
All right, I'll play devil's advocate here because it feels like for the past 24 hours or so, there's been panic, right? The stock market went all sorts of places on the Monday. NASDAQ obviously dropping. So many of these big companies as well, they've been clawing it back. We talk about the Sputnik moment. We talk about NASA versus the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union always found a way to do things cheaper than the American government. Yet, who won the space race? Who got to the moon? Who had the space shuttle project? Who's got SpaceX? It seems to be that despite the amount of money, they still end up with more consumers than what the Soviets and now communist China could ever have. Why does it matter if we're just focusing on power and cost? People are still going to trust a US product, aren't they, more than a Chinese product, even if it's more expensive?
Yeah, well, so the concern here isn't necessarily, the Chinese product. It's more so of why would people need to necessarily buy that higher priced NVIDIA chip instead of that lower priced NVIDIA chip. So that's really the concern. If you really can power systems and have them as efficient and as good on the language model side, then you wouldn't need to have their expensive high margin chip that NVIDIA is selling. Now, again, there's a lot of ifs and a lot of things that we need to find out. The way that I would say right now, if you're looking at the space and you're not invested currently, there's a lot of other ways to play the AI, the infancy of AI, outside of just playing the component side. So, maybe NVIDIA does take a breather because of the concern and the unknown, but you can still play the AI side through an Adobe, through a Microsoft, where that trend is not going to continue, and the chip side's not really going to derail their earnings and their progress.
It's interesting. DeepSeek really shocked the market, and NVIDIA absolutely copped it, obviously. NVIDIA's been an absolute star. If 2024 was a company, it would be NVIDIA. You have a look what happened last year. And it feels like they are so far ahead of everybody else. Yet they're still winning because the Chinese haven't developed their own chip here that is better than NVIDIA's. They're using NVIDIA's chips essentially against NVIDIA's bigger models. Does this now put the focus on one company, and that is NVIDIA, to be able to bring down the cost of their AI chips?
Yeah, I guess, there's so many different parts to this question. So, at first is the question AI, US versus China, and who's getting more share and who's going to develop a better product. And then there's the question on what products are, what components inside are actually powering this chip to make it as powerful as it is. And do you need that high priced one, or can you do that lower priced chip and get the same results? And then it comes down to the AI side. Regardless, we're still in its early innings in terms of adoption and where we're going. So that cycle and the AI growth is going to continue. The question is, on the investment side, do you now want to invest in a component play that it's at risk, or do you invest in a system or a platform play like a Microsoft where you take that component risk out?
All right, let's talk about tariffs quickly. Donald Trump obviously is mulling a universal import tariff starting at about 2.5%. He says it could be much bigger. What are your thoughts on this, given that what's the experience been the last 20 years? Countries with tariffs, the people end up poorer. I think about the car industry here in Australia, where there are tariffs on imported vehicles. It meant that the local car industry became incompetitive, and when the tariffs eventually, it's all swings and roundabouts, when you bring on a tariff, the next government will take them off. When they came off, the car industry collapsed. As a result, it just couldn't keep up. What are your thoughts on tariffs? Doesn't it just hurt US consumers?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at it in terms of it helps consumers on the US branded cars and automobiles, but you certainly can't buy a Chinese EV here in the United States. You're paying 100% tariff there. So if you wanted to buy a car that's, you know, the best of the best on the Chinese EV side, you're paying 2x the cost. And that's why those aren't going to sell in the United States. But in terms of, you know, other products overall, yeah, I mean, it's going to tax the consumer. It's going to cause more inflation. I mean, at the end of the day, prices do go and get passed through to the consumer. And this is an inflationary metric, and it's going to move prices higher. The question will be, is it going to, you know, how high will those tariffs be? What will they, you know, cover? And, you know, is it going to be all countries, or are there going to be some ally that we actually do not tariff?
Yeah, I just wonder about the impact, because it does become tit for tat. I mean, the biggest exporter in the United States is Boeing, which has its own problems. But if other countries start to say, all right, there's going to be tariffs on American products, and airlines around the world, national airlines suddenly have to pay 100% on top of as a tariff for importing an American plane like a 777 or a 787, they're going to start looking elsewhere, which could then have the Chinese, who are already building their own aircraft, turn around and really advance. I mean, this could be disastrous for American exporters, surely.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. I mean, in the near term, this is positive for domestic suppliers. On the longer term, it definitely it behooves the other countries to move faster for their technology adoption and their own internal manufacturing for internal use. So yeah, I mean, I think this is not necessarily a great thing on the long-term basis. In the near term, I mean, the U.S. has a major debt problem, and they're trying to find a way to lower it. This will certainly lower it, but at what cost? And I think it depends on what percentage really going to happen. Obviously, there's been talks as high as 25% plus just for our neighbors in Canada and Mexico, and they really across the board products. It's a wait and see, but at 2.5%, it's not as concerning, but let's see what happens.
Oh, well, with the Australian dollar hovering at about 60 US cents, we've already got a tariff if we travel to the United States. It's pretty tricky. Brad, always appreciate your thoughts and insights across a multitude of topics. We'll talk soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Aaron.